Hello, ladies and friends. That's right. The men are the friends. The ladies are the ladies. It's Dynasty Mode, the unofficial EA Sports college football game podcast. Punch it up. Demetri Ravanos is my friend over there on the screen. If you're watching the YouTube enhanced version, Demetri, what up,
Arky,
youngin? Hey, man.
I'm trying to figure out what game this is in the background. Would this have been a recreation of the game of the century of 2011?
I think it was a recreation of the game of the century, and I'll be honest with you, like if people are watching the enhanced version, we'll put a different screen grab
Oh,
from someone usually. Sometimes I'll get the screen grab. Like last
yep.
week was my screen grab of an emulator. This week I just found it on the old internet, and so I'm guessing someone wanted to relive that nightmarish game.
And,
That I
and
think
and someone made the horrible mistake, if you wanted to relive it, of scoring a touchdown.
Yes. By the way, not the game of the century, the actual one, the rematch that caused the playoff to happen, like the national
Right.
championship version. Yeah, because that one was actually the abhorrent one to watch. The first one wasn't bad, actually.
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends on who you were rooting for, I guess. I will. Have I told you this? Like, I threw my phone against the wall during the regular season matchup at after overtime.
No, you did
Yeah,
not
yeah,
tell
yeah.
me. I only know
The
about you sobbing after an Iron Bowl in a bar.
Right. So 2 years before, obviously Alabama, LSU, and it was not even that Alabama lost. It was I could not take that many missed field goals in a game. And when Alabama missed a field goal and LSU
Oh
made
yeah.
theirs, that's when I found out how good otter boxes are.
Okay. Well, special plug to them. How many
Sure.
times did you throw?
Oh, just one. But
Just
the otter box itself shattered, but the phone was fine.
you shattered. I've never heard of anyone being able to shatter one of those things. So,
Well, most people
congratulations
aren't
on.
passionate, Arky.
I was going to say congratulations on your Verlander arm strength that you
Mm-hmm.
got going all of a sudden. It's really nice to see. Um, so here's what I want to tell you: that we enjoy Dynasty Mode, this podcast, so much that we want to keep going deeper and deeper into it. Right. So that's the whole reason, obviously, for the podcast. But we also got so interested in Dynasty Mode inside the video game last week that we thought, you know what, while we're talking about probation last week inside Dynasty Mode, let's sort of think about the tweaks that we would like to see inside actual Dynasty Mode. So not just in the game itself, but the one mode of Dynasty Mode, which is clearly where we spend most of our time. Is that right, Dimitri?
Absolutely. I mean, that is just about the only way that I still play it. Every now and then I'll get a wild hair up my ass and want to do Campus Legend. And about a game in, I realize, oh, yeah, this mode sucks.
Yes. So, race for the Heisman can't, like, all that just, like, it's all right if, like, you really
It's
just don't want to
fine.
be in the middle of a dynasty, right?
Yeah.
Like, I guess you could tweak it to make it to where I really want to, I guess go through 3 drills and all of a sudden Ohio State wants me, right? So, which is really impressive on my part, to be honest
Yeah.
with you. Like,
Do you remember the old? Geez, this may be like the 16-bit consoles, the Genesis and the Super Nintendo. The old Madden had a version of that for the draft. Like you would do some fake bench presses, you would run the cone drill, and then they would be like, "Hey, you're a first round pick."
well, listen, like, once you get past like 7 or whatever it was, like, it's
Yeah,
like, hey, man, this just fits our algorithm.
right, exactly.
I don't want to make fun of the algorithm because clearly that's how the AI has to work.
Right.
But listen, I've been less of a 5-star recruit my entire life, and I know it takes less than 3 minutes of gameplay to sort of see that.
Right. Right.
Or if I go through my high school season, one of 7 high schools that's available, or just create my own. I'm like, hey man, good job, Montevallo High, right? Like,
That's my favorite. Is it does not matter where you are. You could be from New York City, and your high school is a New York City High.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Cool.
the local public school.
That's right. And now everybody wants me. So
That's right.
It's cool. But I wanted to talk about inside the dynasty. So we were going to go back and forth, and I want to mention a couple of features that I most want to see. So we're going to go back and forth and say our 3 features that we want the most inside Dynasty Mode. And I'm going to start. And I'm just going to basically...
Let me ask you a question real quick before you start. Do we want to count down from 3 to 1?
No, I don't think it really matters.
Oh, right.
Unless you really have these three. So when we came up with this idea, we're like, I had to cut others from the list. So this basically means if I don't get anything else, this would be what I would want on the list.
Okay.
And I don't really sort of have a priority aspect. Like if EA Sports came to me with like a survey, all right, then I'm prioritizing some things. Okay, like I can go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But in this case, these are the three biggest things that I would think enhance the game.
All right, well, you give me your first one, then I'll give you mine.
Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and just piggyback off last week, probation. And I want that back in the game, but I did some more thinking after our podcast that dropped last week, and thank you guys for downloading it. I was thinking about what you were saying about the whole new world that the NCAA and or the shadow government that we're going to have sort of police college intercollegiate athletics. And how they'd have to figure out like NIL money and stuff like that. And I was thinking like that may be a bridge too far. We're so new with NIL, and I'm so still used to like paying players being a quote unquote bad thing if you're the NCAA. I'm still okay with violations being like that. Like if you were paying recruits or paying players while they were there, I'm still okay right now with that being sort of the biggest, baddest thing you can do besides sort of cheating on your tests and stuff. Because I think that's sort of the easiest way to get into trouble since, let's be honest, Demetri, if we're really paying attention to NIL and we really want to get probation mode back in the game, we're already losing all the teeth the NCAA has anyway. Like, why even bring back probation mode if we're going to let NIL be a thing?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a very good point. I wanted to save this one for the end, but I think it piggybacks onto yours pretty well. Well, I tell you what, let me throw some things out regarding your ideas about bringing back probation first. So I think this sort of goes back to something we talked about last week. I get your idea of to make it easier to manage it so that you're not having to manage a video game, with the same ferocity and time commitment that actual athletic departments are managed. You do want to simplify it a little bit, but I go back to, because we're in a new world, if you want to capture or recapture that realism, you're going to have to get some pretty big violations available in there.
Well, that's okay. So that's the other thing.
Let me ask you another question, because this ties into those big violations. In your mind, bringing back probation, would it be possible to be suspected and then have the NCAA decide to do nothing?
Yeah, I think that's okay. I think the dramatic aspect of it is fine, because if I go back and remember what probation was, and we talked all about it last week, go check it out. It's episode 2 in the archives. You really didn't have a lot that sort of the NCAA was overbearing about and get your interest big. So that's why I think if they make the tweaks that get rid of this guy didn't come to practice, the NCAA, who would give a crap about that, right? Like, but you guys there are people, cheating in their exams, maybe creating majors that don't exist, things that are a little more nefarious. Then yes, I think we could sort of give this some teeth back. But if we are just going to continue with the minor, just tardy slip kind of stuff that is really going to be ticky tack for the game, I don't want that kind of probation back, right? Like I want the probation that sort of is more mirrors now, and I mean things like, how about this? How about players to stay on my team, right? They expected something coming in, whether it's playing time or whether it's a little bit of money, whether they thought it was girls, whatever they thought it was, that they would come to me and I would have the choice whether or not, hey, I got to sit them, I got to play them because they said they wanted a certain amount of playing time.
This was part of the old game, right, where you could make promises during the recruiting. Which
this is what I would like to see a return of, and then you're held up to that standard by the player and or whatever assistant coach, whatever.
That's something that I'd love to dive into. We need to do like a series on recruiting at some point, but did that go away with a certain year, or did that go away as we upgraded the systems? I feel like that went away as we moved from,
When
the
we moved from
PS2 into the
systems,
PS3 era.
yeah, I think so. There was sort of a gradual move when they stopped making it for PlayStation, right? Like for
Right.
PlayStation 1, and went exclusively to PlayStation 2 and Xbox, and they stopped making it for Xbox and for 360 and PlayStation 3 and so forth. So I think there was sort of a general migration from that. But yeah,
Yep.
we could definitely look into it when we sort of sit there and do a more thorough piece on recruiting. But yeah, my number one thing, I love the probation aspect of it. If we can clean it up and make it more realistic, that'd be the number one thing I would want back in the game.
All right, speaking of realistic, this I think ties into exactly where we are right now. And you gave me a bridge to go from yours to mine because you said things that went away as we upgraded systems. And I think one of the things NCAA football got wrong, and EA Sports in general sometimes gets wrong, is these new systems that are capable of processing so much more information. EA Sports always defaults to making the graphics better, which are great. The graphics do need to improve as you jump systems, but I hate that it was done at the expense of how much was available to do in the game. So, given where we are now in the world of college football, I'd like to see EA bring back real FCS teams. And you can do this in a different way. If you remember correctly, on the PS2 versions of the game, so this would have been PS2/Xbox versions of the game, you could transition a team up to FBS. And in reality, all it did is, like if you wanted to say move Chattanooga into Conference USA, well, you had to pick a Conference USA team to go down to the SoCon, right? So here's the way I think realistically you could do that in the new version of the game. You can only schedule them if you're an FBS team. You cannot play with them until they become an FBS team, but they are going to transition up. And if you are if you're a successful coordinator, you will always be offered the opportunity to be their first FBS head coach.
I'm not against this. I'm not against this.
This way you can add more teams to the game without having to overwhelm the system with the number of options, right? So you could even make it a little bit more realistic. Maybe an FCS season plays out in the background. So as, a North Dakota State, or hell, one that we're actually having right now, as a Sam Houston State starts to build the program of what they are, and they win a national championship and they're ready to make that leap. Okay, in year, 3 or 4 of your dynasty, here come the Bearcats. Now they're part of the new Conference USA. Here's James Madison. They're now part of the new Sun Belt. And
so the game decides sort of when to bring them up.
Absolutely.
If you start as a coordinator like a red-blooded American should in the system, then you would be the opportunity to be the first FBS head coach at Sam Houston State.
As long, what I think it should have, this is just dawning on me. Not only are you a coordinator, we'll get to a little bend on that I have coming in a minute, but also geographically, you should be reasonably in the same area.
Okay, yeah, because I guess if we're going to go throughout the entire process of thinking about this, right?
Like
why would Sam Houston State be looking for a guy that's coaching Michigan?
Exactly. North Dakota State is not coming to Alabama's defensive coordinator to be their first head coach at the FBS level.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Let's keep this as accurate. We already talked about the pipeline and the recruiting. By the way,
right,
we sort of really lost all the real effective recruiting pipelines, right? It didn't take long before we lost that. Something else still to just be discussed. But yeah, I think I could get on board with that. Now, what would happen after that one team? Like, could other teams come up throughout the game? And
absolutely.
Not necessarily offer you because you'd probably be the head coach somewhere else, or still at Sam Houston State. But it would still be a natural progression of the game.
Absolutely. And I think this is something that as we move forward into new, more powerful systems and the game becomes a fully downloadable thing as to having to fit X amount of information on a disk, this becomes a problem you start to have to deal with as a head coach of your coordinators being given the opportunity to go be the first FBS head coach for Wofford or whoever it's going to be. Go
Well, yeah,
Terriers.
15 years down the road, Wisconsin Whitewater is now
That's
FBS.
exactly.
And you're like, hey, all right, I can't keep losing my dudes. It's actually affecting my team.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. No, I could get on board that the easier transition as opposed to just saying, here's 11 FCS schools, bring them all in at one time. Let's give them some space. Again, and they can always change because again, it's a computer, right? The next time you change you start a dynasty, maybe James Madison's the first team that ends up showing up on there.
Another possibility, which we are seeing play out in the great state of Alabama right now. If you fall flat on your face as a Power 5 head coach, you could always be picked to transition the Jacksonville State Gamecocks up to the FBS level.
Okay, do you want to? We know who we're talking about. Do we have to be so coy?
No, I'm sorry, Richard Rodriguez.
Yes. Okay. All right. We'll never get over how close this dynasty to Alabama almost never happened.
Oh, man. I still believe he could have won at Alabama. Certainly not what Saban did, and maybe not sustainable, but I think he could have won in the short term.
And how quickly you fall, right? Like to think, hey, I don't think that job, I'm good. Never mind. I reconsidered.
Yep.
And then he's the head coach at Jacksonville State right now.
Do you think, I hate to get into real sports talk here, but this is something I've thought about a lot with Rich Rod specifically. And you know what? Maybe the same is true of Kevin Sumlin. Do you think Rich Rod was not the coach he once was, like as college football advanced and everybody was playing that style? Maybe he just wasn't a good coach. Or do you think some of these guys become the victim of Arizona? And granted, Rich Rod's departure, very different than Kevin Sumlin's, right? Kevin Sumlin got dinged for performance on the field. Rich Rod got dinged for performance all over the place. But Arizona is missing a lot of stuff that most modern Power 5 programs have. I wonder how much that plays into this sometimes.
I do like the idea of there being a bit of an Arizona curse. If that could be out there, maybe put that into the game as well.
Yeah.
By the way, guys like Mike DeBose went to coach like high school, like 2 minutes after being the head coach at Alabama. Again, all over the place. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Mike DeBose know what it's all about.
That's right.
The next thing, the second thing I think is it's inevitable. It has to be in the new game, but I would like it to be as robust as possible.
Okay.
And that's customizable playoffs.
I'm glad you brought this up. I had always heard that was supposed to be part of 15, that it was supposed to be very open-ended of did you want the BCS or the playoff?
Well, I think it was after 2001, 2002, maybe. I had to go back and look at the notes that they got rid of the tournaments. Like there was no more postseason tournament, which, would have been cool and all because that's the way I prefer it as opposed to random bowl games. But I think this has to be sort of similar to sort of our probation recruiting sort of FCS thing. I think this has to be like a bit of a robust addition to it. And I mean that I think you should be allowed to, in your own universe, create whether or not you want the BCS playoff to be your thing, which is not really a playoff, it's just a computer formula, but you can still have it. That way it was in the older games. Whether you want the current 14 playoff we have, if you want to expand it all the way up to what Mike Leach wants, which is 64 teams, which would be hell, let us have it, right? Like it's just going to be our choice. Like we get to do it. Or even go back to the voting system. I don't know, just have random polls sort of decide who the national champions. I think if you could sort of develop a customizable playoff format or customizable way to determine your national champion, I think it brings back a little bit of the old school and brings in some of the new school. And again, when we're just talking about creating our own little worlds here, like I don't want to have to wait for 15 years, 20 years to get my 16-team playoff if we ever get it. Like I'd like to just go ahead and do it on my own.
So to me, that is the key, right? Why not just, you don't have the NCAA you have to kowtow to and make happy anymore. Why not just make the version of the postseason that makes fans the happiest, right? If we're all on board for a 12-team playoff and the EA is not willing to go all the way to make it fully customizable, Why not say, well, it seems like people want this 12-team playoff. Let's do the 12-team playoff, and then within that, you can customize. Do conference champions get a bid? Do you use a BCS formula? Do you do whatever? I mean, certainly, no matter how far they go, and your idea of letting people do whatever is obviously the best one. But if they're not willing to do that, let us have some level of customization, because you're not tied down by the NCAA anymore. I guarantee you a big part of the reason that the tournaments went away after the NCAA 02 game was because a lot of people were not happy that Nebraska ended up in that national championship game against Miami. And there, I really do think that there was some level of the NCAA not wanting to let people actively reject the BCS in that way.
I could sort of see that, but although, I mean, it's a really long way to go to sort of get us to not, quote unquote, like the BCS, or to not hate the BCS, to remove a feature from a video game.
What is it you think the NCAA does that they would not have time on their hands to be angry about that?
I don't know how they have any time for anything, to be honest with you. Like, I don't know. Again, we talked, they don't have any dudes to do anything. Like, Mark Emmert, I don't even know. Like, I think, I'm not saying that he's busy. I'm just saying he shows up to one thing every 4 months.
I was about to say, Arky, that's the key, is when you're too busy to do anything, just don't do any of it.
That's what I think he does, right? Like, I think there's just so much, we want to think the NCAA is so busy with all this and figuring out licenses and stuff.
Right.
I think at the end, it's Mark Emmert just sort of, doodling on like a night bright or something in his office in the back corner somewhere, just being away from everybody, just bring them out when it's time to sort of give a championship trophy, or when it's not your responsibility to give it the trophy, like in football. Which is, again, why, if we want to go away from the NCAA being the big bad thing in the video game, we can. Like, we can. I don't think the NCAA wants.
When he's not in public, Mark Emmert is literally on a farm upstate.
Look at him running, huh? Look
at it with all the other NCAA commissioners.
He's so happy. He has no idea that he'll be dead in 2 years.
That's right. All right, my next one, I'm going to take it away from structure and more into gameplay. Dynasty mode is 100%, like, it is all about the coach, right? And if it is all about the coach, then I want a possibility to build your own playbook. And I think this more accurately reflects what we see now. You used to be able to do a version of this on Madden. And remember, we're talking about before even the Wildcat. So the playbooks were very basic on all football games at this point. But, I mean, you think about whether it is Alabama, you think about all the variations of the triple that there are now. I mean, look at what Willie Fritz was running at Tulane before he decided he might like another job at some point. Billy Napier's version of a hurry-up offense is sort of like a hurry-up power kind of thing. I mean, everything is a hybrid these days. So why not let your coach mix and match pieces of his playbook? And maybe as you go further in the game and different coordinators come through the system, or while you're a coordinator, as you go work for different head coaches, it unlocks a new set of plays that you can choose from to add into your playbook.
So by the way, that would be like the Coastal Carolina approach, right? Like Coastal Carolina, like, they're famous for essentially just taking bits of everybody's playbook and sort of making it their own. And you're like, oh, it's interesting to see sort of a run pass option concept right next to like a 5 wide, right next to, like a power counter concept. Like,
in the real world, this kind of happened the year Brian Dable was Alabama's offensive coordinator. And you remember, Dable was the offensive coordinator, and then right before the season started, he became the co-offensive coordinator alongside Mike Loxley. And what I have heard from friends that cover the team is a big part of that was Dable was coming from the NFL, right? He had trouble grasping that Loxley's system was, well, I took a little bit of this from my time with Ralph Friedgen, and I took a little bit of this from, on my own. excuse me, and stuff like that. And like, there is a story that Alabama fans share all the time that Dable did not know how to use a quarterback like Jalen Hurts to the best of his ability. That's why Loxley got the opportunity to call some plays, to work specifically with quarterbacks. Like, that is kind of the reality of college football these days. And for a company whose slogan was, if it is in the game, it is in the game, priding itself on the reality of its sports games, like that feels like customizable playbooks is an obvious step for the next game.
I thought we would get more than 3 episodes in before I had to admit a deep, dark secret on this here podcast. And I'll go ahead, and since
you're the EA guy.
My name is Arky Tiburon.
I knew it. I knew it.
No, I never really experimented with playbooks, and like I think I think I would sort of always go with whatever the team was, right? Well, not necessarily what the team was, but like when you would pick at the very beginning of your dynasty, like what playbook you would pick, I would just sort of pick the team I was going to, and then I would always I never changed the offense, right?
Interesting.
And in the years since, I feel like I missed out on a lot. And so I feel like I'm digging this idea that with this long away from being able to sort of play with a lot of new toys that's been in some of these coaches' playbooks for the last 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
I think that would be a really cool feature. And if you, let's say, beat a team that ran a style of offense, let's say, that you don't run, maybe you unlock the ability to use one of their plays.
Yeah,
something
sure.
like that. Like where there's sort of an achievement mode, like you sort of quote unquote saw it on tape, right? And like now you could add it to your playbook. You just unlocked it by playing them. I would like the idea of possibly with the playbook, maybe starting with a super basic one, and then maybe building up as a coordinator and winning some of those plays. Yeah,
it's funny you say that. So you talk about being stuck with the one playbook. I alternate between 2 playbooks, and I will do it mid-dynasty. If I am coming to a team, usually when I start, I'm using the spread option playbook because it's very run heavy and I don't have to have a great quarterback or great receivers. And then as I move up to better teams and recruit better, then we'll switch to the multiple playbook, the balanced playbook. But that seems very realistic in the sense that like you mold it to the roster. And you know what? Maybe you have a collection of plays that your personnel are not able to perform. Maybe you have a collection
it's a feature
of plays
you're locked out of. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe you have a collection of plays that, given the type of quarterback you have, you're not going to be able to do some of the 4 vert kind of stuff that requires time in the pocket to develop, or, stuff on the run, stuff that RPO, because maybe you don't have a quarterback that's a realistic run option or a run threat. I think there is so much more with playbooks that can be done than the game ever did.
Yeah, I do. Now that I keep thinking about it, I kind of like the idea. If you're going to start super basic and sort of be a coordinator, and let's say, if we're not incorporating the FCS teams from the very beginning, and like you could start there and like have sort of a small FBS program sort of see you, that I kind of like the idea of being able to sort of build your playbook up as you go. And the better you get, the more you're able to unlock plays or unlock certain types of systems or unlock, you always get to sort of the 3 on the screen to choose from. Maybe you unlock a 3-piece at the time, and, and it sort of mirrors, like Brian Daboll didn't know all the, the plays he learned when he clearly didn't know how to use anything barely past the forward pass. So I think, I like this idea. Well, it's fair. It's fair to say that about him. But listen, he's fine. He's fine at the Giants now.
I was about to say, Giants fans, it's going to go great.
It's going to be the best. I don't know if you saw his intro video, but it was basically like, all right, I'm here. Like he just showed up like in his big truck, like in New York, like they like 4 or 5 teams, like the Bears, like just had this like, hey, he's here video, or like they showed the truck pulling up.
Yeah.
And it's just Brian Daboll pulling up in a truck, front of the building, walking in. 12 seconds later, it's done.
Brian Daboll literally looks like you took every Bill Belichick assistant, melted them down, and formed them into one person.
I could see that. There's a the more he goes, there's a little more Kiffin in him. If you want to talk about the the playoff expansion, you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean. Heyo,
That Brian Dable likes sex.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
Oh, is that not what we were talking about?
I was talking about how Lane's getting fat. So.
Oh, sure, gotcha.
The last thing, if I had my druthers, the biggest thing I would one of these three, and this actually may be number one now that I think about it, is I would love a fully immersive recruiting experience.
Okay.
And I know briefly we had a spring game. Like briefly we had something in the spring that
I don't remember that.
Yeah, I think it was like for 1 year or something. I have to go back and find the year. But we had like a spring game. And then we used to have where you could have training and skills and stuff like that. So
training was up to the last one that you played in the Nike complex.
So cool, right?
You're absolutely.
But like
so
I think neon. but I think if you ideally, this is just spitball. Well, I was thinking about this for the last week. You start this whole thing with the spring game, right? You end the spring game. You don't even have to play it. Like if you want to play it, cool. If not, whatever. But you deal with what happens now after spring, the transfer portal. You'll have to be dealing with the transfer portal. You'll have to be dealing with individual players training, whether or not you send some guy to somewhere off on their own to sort of like, get better at their position. They do or they don't. Yeah, like 8 training points. Maybe you actually do the skills with them. Maybe you take your punter to do some coffin kicks.
Yes.
That would be kind of that love punting in the coffin corner. The only thing I think I ever did with kicking. And then you sort of go with the players that you're recruiting for the next year. We get to go back to the style where you're pitching ideas and pitching parts of your program to the recruits. And you're actually, for a short amount of time, we got their feedback and what they thought about your pitch. Sometimes they're like, Coach, that's not really my thing. I don't know why you're trying to pitch me on, graduation rate. I don't really, something like that, right? You send your assistants out. You task them to do it. You used to be able to, like for 2 points, like an assistant would give a phone call, and 8 points, the head coach would actually go to the prospect. You schedule the visits through the season. You sort of select what you feature while they're there for the visit. You even allow for decommitments, right? You allow for players to sort of commit to you, and then whenever they decide,
the recruiting process. Yeah, that's something the recruiting process has always been missing on NCAA.
Oh yeah,
is the decommitment possibility?
Yeah, because it literally happens all the freaking time. So I don't know why you wouldn't just randomly take a guy or two from me, and I'm like, oh, okay, well I'm screwed, right?
Yeah.
And then, going sort of alluding back to what I was talking about before, you allow players to kind of dictate to you what they want, because that's what you kind of have to do as a coach, right? So you either say, hey, this guy wants to be able to be all SEC or play a certain amount of snaps or start a certain amount of games like you used to be able to. Or you're just a hard-ass coach, right? Like you're just like, whatever, I ain't doing jack for you, son. Okay?
That's right.
And you see how that works for you. But again, sort of goes with the fact that like you have to constantly sort of be, and I know I would hate doing this in real life, but as a video game, it'd be fun as hell to just sort of have to like deal with all these 17 and 18-year-old kids coming to my campus and like being like, hey coach, Dad said I'd start 7 or 8 games this season. And I'm like, well, your dad's an idiot, boy, or whatever.
So, so you're saying this is your number one thing you want in the game?
I think I would. Like, if I could pick the top, I would love the recruiting experience to be. We've had pieces of all this before.
Yeah.
But if I could get it all jammed in, I would give up the customizable playoffs and the probation if I could just get this the way I wanted.
Okay. I'm glad that's your number one, because it ties into my number one perfectly. And I don't love the 2K games, the NBA 2K, but their story mode is such a fun thing to play that Dynasty Mode already has a lot of what it needs on the field and even the off-field building from week to week, season to season, but it needs that story that we have all written in our heads, right? So here's my pitch for you for story mode, Arky. You begin.
And this is as the coach, right?
This is as the coach.
Okay.
You begin as a high school coach. And whatever state it is you are in, the game opens with a school geographically close, could be in state, could be, if you're a high school coach in, I don't know, Maine, maybe it's Boston College, comes to you and says, hey, we're here watching the state championship game. We have an opening on our staff, and we're looking at you as a possibility.
You're going to Jeremy Pruitt this thing.
Then you go and you play the game. And you've already decided which side of the ball is your specialty. After the game, however it is determined, you are offered a job as a position coach. Now, your first season, all you can do is control that position group.
I love that. I feel like as a coordinator, that's all you should be able to. But I love that. I love it. I love it. Keep going.
Just like the road to the Heisman, right? Like if you're a receiver, all you can do is control your receiver, right? So all you can do is control that position group. The next year, you are hired at a smaller program to be the coordinator on whichever side of the ball it is you are, and you build from there. All right. So that's the basis of story mode. Where your recruiting ties in goes back to something we've talked about, I think maybe on both episodes of the show so far, is that the personality is something that is going to determine your path. So if you are the guy that is going to get jobs because you are an ace recruiter, or if you're a guy that is going to be unstoppable because maybe you put enough cushion between yourself and the people doing the dirty work that nothing can be tied back to you.
Okay.
All of that is going to play into your experience in the game. And this is the biggest part. Right now, or I guess the last version of the game, you could only get fired for not meeting whatever goals it was that were laid out, in that contract you signed. What if you could get fired not just for NCAA probation? What if you didn't build the right allies on your side? What if you had to deal with real world factors like NIL, like boosters? And I don't necessarily mean them breaking the rules. I just mean think about what Brian Harsin went through at Auburn, right? Just keeping those people, just keeping those people happy. Think about what if you did the, which coach was it that made a point about picking the uniforms or making sure his players picked the uniform combo each week? What if you could tie in things like that? What if you could have recruits giving you feedback of saying things like, hey, coach, really impressed with the program at, I don't know, Charlotte, but it's just not a very good school. Well, what if as the coach, you could go to your boosters and say, hey, we need to invest in these academic departments. And you actually had some control of building up that side of your pitch to these kids.
I would like to be straight up honest with you. I would like a little less of the sort of trying to figure out the academic pitch of it, and sort of, hey, coach, let me try to get some influence, especially that early on, because you're going to get none of it.
Sure.
But, based on the personality type that you can sort of be as a coach, and if you're dealing with boosters, maybe become more favorable if a booster's number 25 hasn't looked too bad lately. You probably could see a few more snaps, you know what I mean?
So and that is, I think, a big part of just college football.
And you get to make decisions like that, yeah.
Right, because part of your decision is A, what is best for you on the field, but also B, am I playing the politics right? I think that is such a very real part of college football. I'd love to be able to play that in a video game.
Yeah, and if you could go fully deep into a story mode like that, and that would take some building, right? Because you're talking about, building 25, 30 years worth of storylines, right? That would just, and all the threads that could come apart one way or the other or go together. Right. So it doesn't feel like an old thing. But I'll tell you this, I think EA Sports, with the way we can get games now, which is virtually when they, I'll be surprised. Well, I wouldn't be too surprised when the new game comes out, because a lot of people will want the hard copy. But most people are probably going to download it, right? A ton of people.
Absolutely.
And that's where we're going to get most of the updates and stuff anyway. So you could constantly be updating sort of EA features. And if that story mode's one of those things where you only get so far, then maybe you continue to add to it, hoping people don't get to year 25 in the first 2 weeks, but
Right.
I sort of see that, right? I sort of see the ability to sort of live a little bit of an interactive movie like that.
I
Because
think
it's also
I think the fun part here would be also, speaking of movies, you could hide celebrity cameos in some of these
okay,
things. Like,
okay.
if you're the coach or a coordinator at USC, maybe you have to deal with Snoop. If you're a coach or a coordinator at Kentucky, maybe you have to deal with Ashley Judd. Maybe Matthew McConaughey has some things to say to the Texas coach.
Terrell Owens they just talked about him working out with Tua on campus. He was in on a podcast recently. Like you get Joe Namath coming in there getting drunk on campus, right?
That's so you would have to have legends from some of these schools, but also like Eric Church has canceled a concert to come see your game this week.
Just pay a guy $100. Say, hey, can we just put your name in the game or something real quick?
Yeah, exactly. Fun. Exactly. Yeah. Like some of them, like you would start like with Snoop, right? You'd want Snoop to voice a part. But with some of them, like, hey, Ashley Judd, can we just have you wave from the crowd? Can we just have you a shot of you shaking hands with the new coach?
Yeah, we never see you at football games, but
that's right.
We're making a football game here. Let's come on. We know you're the most famous Kentucky fan. Come on now.
Yeah.
The only pushback I have is I worry with what EA Sports has done in the past that would get short shrifted a lot compared to what we're sort of building up in our head, right?
Oh, absolutely. But I think really at the base of what we want as players of the game is some sort of story where, we are not giving press conferences on our toilet anymore.
Yeah, like how about a press conference where you actually ask and you can give responses by, you choosing between 3 or 4 responses. You know what I mean?
Right. Like, that's part of the 2K game, right? Like depending on how you answer, it affects how you're treated in the locker room, and it affects whether or not you get past the ball on the court.
Yeah, and maybe, it finds out like if you don't answer the questions nicely, don't play ball with reporters, maybe they do more digging into your program than you'd like them to do digging into your program. And next thing you know, boom! The CAA is on your front doorstep.
That's right.
I think this is not the bones of a good idea. This is a really strong idea. And I think if we're building, I think if we were to put everything we wanted on this podcast today into the next game, we definitely could not get it on one disc. But we don't have to anymore. So that's the cool thing. And I think if you get close to some of this, I mean, we're talking a lot of our stuff is pie in the sky a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's when we go deep, deep, deep into the devil of details. Like maybe Ashley Judd doesn't show up, right? Okay. Fine. Maybe, right?
Fine. I'll give back Ashley Judd.
Okay. But you have to give us the story mode.
You're right.
Like, that's going to be our trade-off. If you have to take off Will Ferrell, whatever, give us the story mode. I can be with you. Like I think. Now, do you want that to be the Dynasty Mode, or do you want that to be an option of Dynasty Mode? So you go into Dynasty Mode and you pick New Dynasty or like Story Dynasty.
So I would prefer that be the Dynasty Mode, but Arky, I am a man of the people. I would like people to want that and not have it forced upon them.
I think that would be the best way to go. Yeah. Although I'm with you. I would want to go. I've played other games. I don't usually put headphones on and get away from, I don't have time to get into a full season with an 18-month-old. Sure. I don't usually try to put on my headphones to get away from everybody, try to fully experience something. But if there's a story mode, wife and kid got to go. Like, I mean, not divorce and put them up for adoption. No. Just go have a nice long weekend.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Maybe you go stay with your mother.
That's right. She would want to take all the responsibilities of an 18-month-old so I could play a video game. That's what she wants.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what being a grandparent is.
Hey, let us know in the comments here on YouTube what feature you would like to see most inside Dynasty Mode. You can tell us on Twitter, too. You can see our handles up there on the old screen if you're watching the enhanced audio version, which is actually a video. At Arky Shea, at Demetri Ravanos. And Demetri...
It's so enhanced, it's a video.
It's so enhanced. Listen, you keep saying that. That may be the first time you said it.
Yeah.
The first time you said that, we've got good video here, right? But before we go, Can we dedicate this episode to a friend of ours real quick?
Oh.
Someone we really like real quick.
You're gonna make me cry, but give it a play, Arky.
This week we lost someone special.
Hi, this is Gilbert Gottfried, and this is for Demetri Ravanos. Demetri Ravanos. It sounds like, you sound like a villain in a Zorro movie. Demetri Ravanos. Or you could be a villain on Star Trek. But anyway, Demetri Ravanos. I want to wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Have yourselves a very Merry Christmas. Keep the Yuletide bright, and one day all your troubles will be out of sight. Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Anyway, you have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
My favorite from when I was a kid until his dying day.
This one goes out to you, Mr. Gilbert Gottfried.
Noted fan of the NCAA college football video game series.
Absolutely. Until we see you guys again next week, Demetri, want to play them out?
Save and sim to next week, everybody.